Welcome to another episode of TERF Talk Down Under. I'm Stassja and this is Ange. Hi, Ange.
Hi, Stass. How you going?
Yeah, not too bad. Another busy week of stuff. I'd like to start off with there is a protest in Brisbane tomorrow against self-ID. We know that it's coming and it's probably going to be passed, but it's important to get out there and educate the public and make your views known. So I'll put a link in the description so that you can get in touch with IWD Brisbane Meanjin and go along to that event. And speaking of protests, there's been some big stuff going on overseas. Fred Sargent, right with him. So he was one of the original organizers of Pride March. Back then it was called something like the Gay Liberation March back in, I don't know, 1969 or something like that. Original organizer, campaigner for gay rights, was attacked, assaulted, had something like $500 worth of stuff stolen off him. There was terrible footage going around of a woman abusing him, trying to rip his sign off him. Yep. These people have no fucking idea what they've done, who they've just attacked. They're part of a cult.
Fred's 74. Yeah, Fred's 74. He's a very sprightly 74. People were describing him as elderly, and I'm going, what? But no, he is 74 years old, and he was set upon by, people like a third of his age, and they were violent. He was wearing an LGB Alliance T-shirt, and he said, and a sign that said, black face and woman face with them both crossed out, and they just launched at him. And people were spitting on him. They threw coffee over him. Like, he was full on assaulted.
Shocking stuff. And on par with that, Posey Parker, Kelly J. Keane held a very successful Let Women Speak event in Brighton in the UK. And, oh, mate, that woman who was yelling at the man with his baby that he's a fucking fascist and he's raising a fascist baby. What a nutter.
So a 74-year-old, yeah, and a baby gets attacked by these lunatics. A baby, not even 1 year old.
And it turns out she's like a staffer for a Labor MP over there. And she's, apologized for making the trans community look bad. So she hasn't apologized for screaming, "You're a fucking fascist" in the face of a baby. She's apologized to the trans community. And oh, mate, it's just insane.
And another woman threw glitter in Aja's hair. And it is a tactic to, target people with, black women with afro sort of hair, because the glitter will stick and it's really hard to get out, particularly from dreadlocks. And this woman targeted her and threw a bag of glitter at her head.
And the glee with which she did it. Did you see the photo? Yeah. Smiling. She's so satisfied. These people.
Men all looking on. Yeah. What got me of all those attacks was the men in the background watching women be aggressive towards each other, rubbing their hands with glee.
Anyway, well done, UK Wims. That was a very impressive event. I watched some of the speeches and, well worth it. And there were some big names there. And was Posey Parker wearing a body cam? Did you see she had this little...
Yes.
Was that a body cam?
Yeah, well, she was threatened.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I mean, in the last couple of weeks, we've had the trans activists threaten to counter-protest any action that we do in Melbourne. But even if they do, like what happened to Posey, the police are obliged to keep the peace, so I'm not that worried. But on the other hand, all they're going to do is make themselves look ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because the reasons that we protest, like the fact that there are males in women's prisons, like the fact that minors are being sterilised and having invasive surgery, you've got to be a lunatic to come out and oppose that.
Mm-hmm.
Especially to violently oppose it, and to, and this was it. This was young people attacking basically middle-aged women. The same at the lesbian strength event that was held a couple of days before Posey's event. All these thugs and violent lunatics turn up to target mostly middle-aged women. It's insane.
Yeah, it is. It really is. In good news, here in Australia, there is a parliamentary e-petition. So this is a petition that goes straight to the Federal House of Parliament, calling on them to launch an inquiry into the medicalisation of children under the gender affirmation model of care. When I signed, it was at about 4,000 signatures. And last time I checked, it's up to 12,000 signatures. So
Excellent.
It has reached the magic number of 10,000, which means it has to be discussed in Parliament, which is bloody brilliant. The brains behind that petition is a woman who's with the Australian Christian League. I can also say that she has been instrumental in organising parents of children who have got sucked into the cult and experienced rapid onset gender dysphoria. She's paying for some of those parents to fly to Canberra. I think it's next week that Parliament is sitting, and she's organised all these meetings to sit down and talk to MPs. So I know that there is some bad blood between feminists and the Australian Christian League, but you know what? On this point, I think they've done an excellent job, and I'm willing to put differences aside to protect children.
Yeah.
So please sign the petition. I will put a link in the description.
The longer this drags on and the left refuse to stand up, the more we have to align with people who maybe we wouldn't have possibly aligned with. I mean, there are limits, obviously, for everybody. However, it's all very well to say, don't align with the Christians, don't align with Sky News, don't do this, while people are sitting there and the only thing they're doing is commenting on Facebook posts with their anonymous sock account.
Yeah.
If people are willing to stand up and put their reputation on the line for this issue, we should try and support them, which is a good lead-in into what Matt Walsh has been doing. Personally, can't stand the guy. Yeah. However, he and his, whoever they are, journalist buddies, did an investigation just via their own website into Vanderbilt Children's Hospital's gender clinic. And they found out all these horrific things, like that 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds were having puberty blockers, that 11 and 12-year-olds were getting cross-sex hormones, and that they were performing mastectomies on 13-year-old girls, right? They also have this thing where they send, trans activists in with new patients and their parents pretending to be a support person, but actually calling out any of the physicians or parents who refuse to affirm the child. It's like something out of a bizarre cult. So, they found out all this really, really dodgy stuff. And the thing that got me, though, well, one, Vanderbilt Children's Hospital the next day deleted their entire website. So if that's not an admission of guilt, what is? However, all of the things that this hospital were doing are routine practices here in Melbourne Royal Children's Hospital. Maybe not the 13 age limit, but we know they're giving mastectomies to children at 15. So, it's not, it's only happening overseas. It's happening right here. And yet our media is completely silent on it.
Yeah. The other interesting thing, because when you told me about it, I actually went to Matt Walsh's YouTube channel and watched what they had put together. And the other interesting point was they found footage, and this was stuff that the hospital had just freely uploaded onto the internet, of someone from the hospital with a really annoying voice talking about how much money there is to be made from these surgeries. And it's great because they're repeat customers, because they have to come in for checkups and corrective surgeries. Like, it is the Wild West over there when it comes to this transgender medicine nonsense.
It is here too. And this is it. We were called conspiracy theorists. We were told that we were full of shit, saying that there's massive money to be made by the Andrews government towards their failing healthcare system from gender medicine. And everyone says, oh, you're a crackpot. But it's true. It's true. The pharmaceutical companies, the surgeons, they're bringing an income stream in. And the government supports it because they need the money. The health system's failing. And the mental health system is collapsing. And they can take all of those potential mental health clients, like really, youth, and they can turn them into gender clients. So instead of being a drain on the system, they're bringing money into the system, and they can medicalize them. It sounds like a bizarre theory. And, 6 years ago, if someone told me the same thing, I'd say that they were tripping. But it's true. It's all happening.
And look, WPATH have just released their updated standards of care, version 8. And look, they've lost the plot, mate. Despite Genevieve Gluck's investigation exposing the eunuch archives, they've ploughed ahead and included this whole fucking section about men who want their testicles removed being a minority marginalized class and a gender identity, which is insane. But they've also, despite what their own Dr. Marcy Bowers, who was the one that operated on Jazz Jennings, despite him saying that if you put kids on puberty blockers too early, they will never experience sexual pleasure or orgasm. Despite all that, they have gone ahead and they've reduced the age at which children can receive puberty blocking drugs down to 9 years old. I don't know what it was before. And they've also reduced the age restrictions on surgical interventions. So double mastectomies and genital surgeries, now it's okay for people under 18. Just mental, like doctors, not just doctors, but medical associations need to cut ties with WPATH here in Australia, OzPath, all of these paths around the world. Endocrine societies need to say, no, we're not listening to you anymore.
Sorry, I've got a delay, because my internet's terrible. And I noticed that Nullo stuff they were talking about was also linked to child pornography.
Oh.
So it was linked, they referenced an agency that has formed for child pornography, like Nullo Fantasy, involving children. So that was on Matt Walsh's blog as well. Ugh.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And LGB orgs, autism orgs, all of the surgical associations, psychological associations, psychiatrist associations, they've got to drop these trans orgs, OzPath, WPATH. They just have to do it. Yeah. And if you're a member of any of these associations, you have to lobby them.
Absolutely. And, as we know, this creation of the transgender child is all for the benefit of middle-aged men, such as the woodwork teacher from Canada, who has been rocking up to school with these giant prosthetic breasts that have erect nipples protruding out of his shirts that he wears. And kids are being subjected to this shit at school.
Boys mainly, teenage boys who are already messed up from pornography have a cross-dressing psycho as a woodwork teacher in an objectified friggin' hyper porn bodysuit. It's just revolting.
And the school has come out in support of him, saying, oh, we support his gender expression.
Yeah, if I turned up to pick up my kids dressed like that,
yeah,
you know, they'd send the cops.
Yeah.
And it'd be fair.
I think it would be so funny if the female teachers and students at that school all went out and bought a pair of giant prosthetic breasts and showed up to school wearing it. Like, it would really make a point. Nice. Crazy days. Okay, well, our guest has arrived, so I'm going to bring her in.
Yay.
We have returning for her second appearance on TERF Talk, the wonderful Janet Fraser. Hi, Janet. How you going?
Hi.
Welcome.
Hi. Tea and turfing.
Nice.
How are you going?
Good, good. How are your studies going? You're studying law at the moment?
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. How's that footy?
Do you get a public holiday today for the grand final?
No, that's peculiar to you Mexicans, that one. We just got the public holiday yesterday that everybody got for the loss of the foreign head of state.
Yes, yes. Well, look, I've invited you on because you're studying law, you've read a bit of the case law around medical transitioning of children. We've just had this story come out of Queensland during the week. I'll just read out the first paragraph because it's so bizarre. A teenage boy in a girl's body has been given urgent permission to access testosterone without his father's consent in a landmark court case. But a legal expert warns there is no certainty for future cases. What do you make of it, Janet? What went on there?
I printed that out and read it. I think that's probably muffling, isn't it? I think what distinguishes this from the two cases, and there's only two cases that His Honour refers to, being re Imogen and re Jamie. I think what distinguishes this case is that His Honour has invoked what's called the parens patriae capacity of the court. And I suspect that this is why people have said, but there's no certainty for future cases going forward. So let me turn to my many notes.
Just quickly, what's parens
patriae? That's what I'm about to tell you. Thank you for asking. Good Dorothy Dixer there. So in paragraph 5, His Honour says that the application is brought in this court pursuant to the parens patriae jurisdiction. An issue which must be given consideration is whether, having regard to the fact that the child is the child of a married couple, this application ought to, in fact, be heard by the Federal Circuit and Family Court. So His Honour has said that the urgency of the application, which I really query, but there we go. The urgency of the application means that the original application to the Federal Circuit Court, which is like the Federal Circuit Court's what we have now instead of the Family Court, has been removed. And so His Honour is happy to hear this because he feels that it's really, really urgent. So what is parens patriae? Well, Paul Brereton explained this. It says, the modern jurisdiction is wide-ranging and far-reaching. It extends as far as necessary for the protection and education of the child. It is not a jurisdiction that is encumbered with technicalities. No jurisdictional limits have ever been described, and subject to the requisite nexus with the welfare of the child, in theory, it is unlimited. So this judge has put himself in the position of being supreme decision maker for this child. The fact that the mother agrees is immaterial, and the fact that the father disagrees is immaterial. Burton goes on to say, the power is more extensive than that of parents because the courts can authorise or permit steps to be taken in relation to children, which even parents cannot. All right. I think this is kind of problematic.
That's
such as,
yeah.
It's a bit, it's a bit of a development, really, isn't it? Such as to consent to particular kinds of operations or to authorise indefinite protective detention. Thus has been said the jurisdiction is of a very broad nature and can be invoked in such matters as custody, protection of property, health problems, religious upbringing, and protection against harmful associations. It's also been invoked to enable the performance of medical procedures where consent by or on behalf of a child has not been forthcoming, including vaccination, involuntary admission and treatment for anorexia nervosa, abortion, sterilisation of an intellectually disabled child for reasons which were not therapeutic, parentage testing, and even indefinite protective detention and restraint. So Burton says, while it's extremely broad, it is to be exercised with restraint only in exceptional cases and with considerable caution, and there must be some clear justification for the court's intervention to set aside the primary parental responsibility for attending to the welfare of the child. And he goes on to describe three modern cases, one involving a child in the care of the Minister for Youth and Community Services, so a ward, which is traditionally, I believe, the jurisdiction for parens patriae, a 15-year-old girl who needed an abortion. So the court stepped in and provided via this jurisdiction the capacity for that to happen. A child who needed treatment for anorexia, and the health department felt that her parents were a problem, so they just bypassed them via parens patriae. And the last one is one that Brereton sat himself, which was the rights of a 15-year-old boy with regard to detention of this child in order to treat him for significant self-harm and violence towards others. And there's a little postscript saying he's 18 now and he's doing way better. Yeah. So I think that's really interesting and significant that the court has chosen to use that particular jurisdiction on this occasion.
So it's overruled a previous decision in case law, hasn't it? Or...
Well, it's kind of bypassed it by saying I'm invoking parens patriae. So it doesn't actually matter what that says. And the concentration on Gillick competence. So Gillick competence is a child who has achieved, quote, a sufficient understanding and intelligence to enable him or her to understand fully what is proposed. And that's a British case from 1985. It's actually about a woman called Mrs. Gillick, who wanted to prevent the local health authority in the UK from providing contraception to teenaged girls without parental consent. Anyway, she lost the case and now forever it's named after her. So there's an irony. And so there's this theory that as the judge in this particular case says, oh, I think I've mixed up my notes. If the child has sufficient Gillick competence, then it doesn't matter what the parents think. But the thing that I always raise with this stuff is how can you be Gillick competent and think you're the opposite sex? Like, can you be Gillick competent and think you're Napoleon? Because you've got the same chances of being right.
Yeah.
So, like, if we didn't live in Crazy Town, that would be an immediate point for people to go, you're not Gillick competent. You think you're a boy. Sorry, mate, you're a girl.
I wonder what who advised the judge of best practice regarding transgender kids. And I imagine the outcome of this case will be 10, 15 years from now, if this child survives the mental trauma of realising what happened to them, that they will come back as an adult and sue this judge, and we won't hear about it because taxpayers will give them a tidy sum. That's what I predict will probably happen.
Well, I think if people could sue judges, that would change the landscape.
Or the system, yeah. Yeah, the system, yeah.
So this judge has actually said, with regard to the Gillett competence and describing the child herself, even though he only says the child throughout, there's no pronouns. She actually said at one point, I have autism. Maybe that's why I think I'm a boy.
Oh,
Like, is this not a giant fucking red flag for practitioners?
Yeah. I noticed in the article too, they referred to the father as the husband. And I was like, oh my God, they're still married. Like, are they separated? Like, what's going on there? What a huge
that I don't know.
Yeah.
But I did, yeah, the father, who's the respondent, which means the mum has applied on behalf of the child, so he's responding. His position appears to be that he does not agree there is a need for treatment, or indeed that the child has gender dysphoria.
Yeah.
So, you know, one suspects that this is a father who has been silenced by the court action, basically, because no one can speak out about the proceedings when they're involved.
Yeah, I've got a friend who's who transitioned her child. Her daughter had a mastectomy at 15, and she's since separated from her husband. And I said to him, you know, how did you go along with all this? If you know, if you don't think the surgery should have happened, how did you go along? And he goes, you know, mum gets her way. I didn't feel that I had a choice. That mum and the kid decided between them, and because I was the odd one, it went ahead. And eventually they separated for other reasons.
So he didn't.
I was just shaking my head, you know.
Yeah. He didn't seek to take court action over that.
No, I don't think he had the means, because that's the other thing. And, you know, I've seen this in my friendship group weaponised in family court by separated parents, that one child wants to trans the child and the other one doesn't. And I've even had situations where one parent is suggesting to the child that they are transgender, and this is specifically an autistic child, in order to get the other parent offside. Crazy stuff.
Well, that's basically, you've just described the story of Re-Imogen.
Tell us about that one. Yeah.
Well, in Re-Imogen, a teenaged boy who is the older of two kids, has a younger sister, was being medically transitioned by the father, who denies in court that he is a perpetrator of male violence in the family home. The mother and the two children were receiving victim support psychological counselling on the state's purse, but he denies the violence. And so the child, after a weekend away with the father and the father's girlfriend, who is doing a PhD in gender identity ideology, the child announced that he was a girl and here's my new name. And the mother, I think, I haven't heard any more, but the mother had only seen him once after that. And this was, you know, a significant period, over a year and a bit. So eventually, because the parents disagreed about, and it's all very muddy, this case, because the parents disagreed about whether or not he should be given artificial estrogen, they ended up in court. Of course, he had already been given puberty suppressing drugs, despite the mother not knowing or consenting. So she'd basically got a text going, oh, hey, kid is on puberty blockers now.
Wow.
So she got legal advice, went to court, And despite the judgment in the case actually being, well, you can't do it without the permission of both parents, the child was given drugs. But the side note to this is the father, throughout this time, had been illegally importing artificial estrogen from Thailand and administering it at home, and admitted this in court, and the judge is like, oh well.
Wow.
I am staggered at the absolute failure and willful disregard for safeguarding that all of this has. Like, in what fucking world do we think that importing drugs illegally, it's an offence, should just be wiped because you've decided that your boy is actually a girl?
Yeah.
And if you read through that case, which is actually much more publicly, much more of it is publicly available than this case from Queensland, it's really clear that the father is pushing this. The child even sometimes says things like, I don't want to go out in a dress, and dad's like, put the dress on, put the dress on. You know, this child is severely psychologically damaged by the father, who isn't violent in the family home. And yet this is where we're at, you know. And while I was researching all the bloody depressing stuff, I also at a recent article, editorial really, in the Medical Journal of Australia, right? And what I found interesting about this is that it was published 10 days prior to the judgment in Re A, which is the Queensland case. And it basically says that trans youth penalised by Re Meanjin family court decision, right? So this is activist physicians going after this decision. And what I found really chilling about this stuff is that the lack of consent by parents is considered a detriment to the child, which a court should be able to override, and which Gillick competence should be able to override. So these are some, unsurprisingly, academics from La Trobe. I'm so proud.
La Trobe is just a hub for the gender identity stuff. It really is.
Hotbed now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they were the ones that developed the Safe Schools program that got rolled out.
Yeah, that's right.
There's been recent research around trans and gender diverse experiences in the criminal justice system.
I can talk about that at length.
Yeah.
But what this article says is that asking for parental permission may force a young person to re-engage with a parent who has a history of perpetrating family violence, to disclose confidential personal information to an estranged or uninvolved parent, or to enforce legal barriers, including costs when consent cannot be established. So what this says is that a lack of family support should be regarded as a vulnerability and not a means to impede medical care. So what they're saying is, if your parents support you to be sterilised, that's great. But if your parents don't support you to be sterilised, that's fine too, because that's a special vulnerability before the court, and therefore we shouldn't use that to impede the fact that we want to get you sterilised.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, it's...
The health and well-being of trans youth requires respect for their right to autonomy, agency, and access to evidence-informed healthcare. Chance would be a fine thing, people.
What was that last bit, sorry?
Improving the health and well-being of trans youth requires respect for their right to autonomy, agency, and access to evidence-informed healthcare.
Yeah, right.
And not to point a turkey finger at anybody, but this editorial was put together by a person whose LinkedIn profile, she, her, will do for now. It says, she, her, will do for now. So you basically got an activist running the Medical Journal of Australia online content and supplying us with treats like that.
Oh, mate, academia is just overrun with this stuff at the moment. Did you happen to read, there's a really good article that came out by this woman, Laura Favaro, and she's like a young academic, and she went out and asked a range of women who call themselves feminists about the current, transgender divide that has occurred in feminism. And so she interviewed gender critical women, she interviewed pro-trans women, and then she interviewed women that were in the middle. But it was so interesting because the bit that really captured me was the women that claimed to be in the middle. Well, as she probed and asked more questions, it became quite clear that they're gender critical, and but they don't want to call themselves gender critical, and that they've really had enough of the cancel culture tactics of the pro-trans feminists. It was so insightful.
Yeah, I have, to my shame, I have not read it yet, but I certainly saw some of the rage on Twitter and some of the mea culpa apologies for having taken part in something that's going to harm trans people.
Sorry, I can hear some static. There's someone.
I don't know what that is.
Is it my internet?
Is something playing, or?
I don't think it's mine. I can't hear.
Okay.
I'm lip reading.
Oh, all I have is a cat snoring and no one can hear him. So that's good.
Oh, the delay's so bad, and my volume for some reason has gone, and I'm here like.
We need automatic captions for you.
Yeah. Not all academics are lost. We had a sociologist, Michael Biggs, wrote something very interesting about the trans situation. And for me, as someone with a sociology background, it was very, very good to see. So, yeah, because we all often get blamed unfairly for propagating this whole trans dogma in academia, but it wasn't us. So, yeah, and Michael Biggs is probably the world's probably most well-known sociologist. So that was a really good thing. So,
and
yeah, I haven't read it either, but I'm going to.
I think he's great. But then
and there are academics in our inbox too who support us privately as well.
Yeah.
So there you go. Shout out to them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Janet, what about the Georgie Stone case? Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because he's pretty much Australia's version of Jazz Jennings. Yeah.
He, to go back a step, one of the things that I think most people don't realise in Australia is that all the community legal centres are captured and most of the law firms, as far as I can see. So the Rainbow Mafia has the capacity to provide free, unending legal support. So this is one of the reasons why the trans lobby is so litigious. If you look online in various legal databases, there is a perpetual list of complaints from men about all kinds of government services which are being transphobic by treating them as if they're men. So Georgie, unfortunately for him, is a victim of this juggernaut. And so he was used as the poster child, partly, I suspect, because he comes from a nice, normal nuclear family. So he doesn't have any of the psychosis or trauma that you see in a lot of the kids if you look in the family court judgments, like even the girl who's psychotic, but the judge is still like, yeah, oh, hell yeah, give it the tea. So I suspect that he was carefully chosen because he was a great poster child, basically, for what they want to say. Look, lovely, normal, white child from happy family. And then, of course, he ends up on Neighbours. So, this just cements him in place. So, yeah, they paid for all of that, the lobby. in order to go to court and have it made so that you didn't have to go to court in order to have a child's normal puberty suppressed. So we can take from this that poor Georgie has a micro penis, which they've now removed and attempted to invert in some way.
And he's gay as well.
And it is clear that Georgie would have grown up to be a happy gay man, as would Jazz Jennings, whose life will now be shortened by the significant iatrogenic harm done to him by activist physicians.
Yeah.
So I feel great despair when I look at young men like that, and I think we really thought we'd kind of nailed the homophobia thing, right? We thought like serious homophobes were confined to various pockets of opinion in society, but they weren't major decision makers. Now they can have their children castrated because better a straight daughter than a gay son, right?
Yeah.
So I really feel for that kid. He's being used in the most pernicious way possible. His life has basically been wrecked. If he can ever find anyone who wants to have sex with him, he won't be able to have an orgasm. He can't have kids.
And his mother's built a career based on his gender identity as well. A lucrative career.
She has, as you know, have a number of it seems to be mothers particularly who end up in that public position. Although, you know, look at Andy Medic, right? He had a platform on transing his kids. Now they're both trans, so yay him. And we never heard any more about the son who assaulted someone on the street.
Yeah.
You know, politicians, right?
Just with the Georgie Stone court case, was he actually being prevented from getting puberty blockers? Did he have a personal need to take his case to court, or was it just he did it for the trans lobby?
I think that at that time, the way it was set up was you had to go to court to ask for permission to start your child on that path, whoever you were and whatever you thought.
Yeah.
So, that's how he ended up being there. Because there's this idea that it's somehow urgent that the child gets treatment.
Yeah.
And I read all of this and I'm thinking, what the fuck are you treating if the cure is to make a girl's voice lower and develop her facial hair and make her hair fall out? Like, what is that curing? How is this urgent? You know, and this is where they step up the suicide lie, right?
Yeah. I was just going to read out another paragraph from the article from Brisbane. It's just stated as fact. It says, transgender and gender diverse young people are at significantly higher risk of suicide, self-harm, depression, and anxiety. But timely access to gender-affirming services achieves the same or better health, social, and educational outcomes as their peers. It's
health,
just
social, and educational, really?
It's just like said as though it is fact. From what I understand, there are some serious problems with the research behind what they've said there. I know for a fact that there was research from the University of Washington earlier this year where the authors had misrepresented what the data showed. They promoted it to all these media outlets saying that gender affirming care definitely improves mental health,
Save lives.
But when Jesse Singal, an investigator, went and had a look at the actual data, it was like, no, it didn't show that. It showed that it stayed the same. So we're just getting this lie. This is the big lie that is repeatedly told by the trans lobby and then repeated by the media. And so all these parents... Pardon?
And the judiciary.
Yeah, they just like swallowed the lie. Yeah.
Do Georgie Stone has a Netflix documentary out at the moment. They are romanticising childhood gender transition, and he's the poster boy for it. Absolutely despicable, and it's been advertised on all the youth channels.
Yeah,
Oh,
I read a Guardian article about this brave and stunning piece of media. And it described him sobbing and saying, "I didn't choose to be trans, but that's just who I am." So there's so many times when these kids could be supported to re-enter reality. I know you didn't choose to be trans, it's because you're not trans. There's no such thing as trans, dear heart. You're just a gay boy. So let's just turn off the phone and read some W.H. Auden, and let's go learn about what it's like to live as a gay man.
Well, thank you, Janet. Thanks for filling us in on all those details. Now we've got a Women's Declaration International webinar on tomorrow night. Do you want to do a little plug for that? I
would love to do a little plug for that, even though I'm not chairing this month, but I do normally chair. So this month, very excitingly, we've got these awesome women from a thing called TERF Talk Downunder.
Oh, sounds interesting.
It is really interesting, and you should hear what they have to say about keeping women's prisons single sex, or everybody's prison single sex, but, you know, women, and about what it's like to organise a demo about that. So I think that that's something we can all take home and learn from. I think there's something in that for all of us, don't you? And also Kit Kowalski, who is a thorn in the side of Australia's Stonewall, ACON, is coming on to talk about ACON, because it is time we broke open that story, and the media doesn't really seem to want to do it, and particularly given that Melbourne Uni has suddenly announced this discussion evening where they've got all these people, trans activists and actually not trans activists, talking all on the one night. I think that's a really good time for us to start increasing the pressure on media and others to begin to get to grips with the fact that we have this lobby group that has just run riot over all of our normal safeguarding, is encouraging gay men and lesbian women to hate themselves and become straight, and is trying to trans our kids. So let's talk about why so many government departments have ACON's stamp of approval. I always like to mention to people that ASIO runs the coffee cart at the Pride in Diversity conferences.
Wow.
Have you ever heard of ASIO running the coffee cart at a feminist conference? But they're so oppressed and a vulnerable minority, and on the outer of, you know, they're anti-cops and they're not part of the establishment. ASIO running the coffee cart, people.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that tidbit. Thank you.
It's one of my favourite things. All right. Well, thank you very much for having me.
Thanks,
Thank
Janet.
you.
I'll put a link in the description for anyone who wants to sign up for tomorrow night's webinar.
Please. That would be awesome. We really need to get lots of women at those. They are women only.
Yeah.
But yeah, we really need to start having these discussions with Australian women.
Fantastic. Thanks, Janet. See you soon. Bye. The Women's Declaration International webinars, they're really good consciousness raising. It can be very depressing. There are some very difficult topics covered at times, but it's well worth, it's once a month. Get in there, connect with other women. Yeah.
Yep.
Wow. Okay. What else has been happening, Ange?
I'll check my list. Oh, Dani Laidley.
Yeah. He had a Cinderella moment at the ball.
Yep.
At the Bravo.
He was the human headline for that week, for those few days. It was Dani Laidley here, Dani Laidley there, every newspaper, every, TV, everything. So the Brownlow Medal is the award for the best player in the Australian Football League, right? Or best, I don't know, the person who gets the most points for playing well. And it's a big social event with all the players and the wags, and everyone gets done up like it's the Oscars or something. And this year, Dani Laidley, who is a male former North Melbourne coach, rocks up with his girlfriend in his full AGP ball gown and all, makeup and whatever. And of course, all the newspapers went wild. Absolutely wild. Now, what they failed to mention was the fact that, and they're fawning over him, like ridiculously fawning over him. What they didn't mention is the fact that Dani Laidley's trans status only came into public attention when police convicted him of stalking and drug offences.
He wasn't convicted, he was charged.
Charged. Sorry, charged. And and he accepted a plea. And he only came out as trans when that happened. Mm. And he was sort of projected as now our most well-known trans person. And he's had book deals, and Stassja just told me that he's got a TV series or something coming out special. And, he's committed, he was accused of committing these crimes that have been completely ignored. And the victims have been ignored. Pardon?
He pleaded guilty to those crimes.
Yeah. So, kick in the face.
Oh, mate. Just the hulking body size difference between him and his girlfriend. Like, it's so obvious. And look, the white dress, what's he going for there? Was that just some stylist told him that white dresses are in this season? Because there were a lot of... But like the virgin aspect of wearing a white dress, the debutante aspect of wearing a white dress. For those that don't know the history of the debutante ball, it was where women who had just come of age and were ready to be married off to breed and have children, they had a ball, and the young ladies would wear a white dress. Like I see aspects of that going on there as well.
He had these like hand covers on it to hide his man hands. And did you see there was a picture of him, because the dress is like this satin material, and there was a picture of him showing the outline of his erection.
It looked like it.
So that, the theory that these guys get off on the attention of people acknowledging their womanhood, ugh. Mm. So, but he wasn't. I had a tweet that went a bit mental that pointed out the fact that he was a DV perp, and he hopped into my inbox last night to say that I was shit canning him, and I didn't deny it. So,
yeah, you sent me the screenshot of that, and it was very apparent that he's trying to paint himself as some sort of victim, that, he wasn't really a domestic violence perpetrator. He wasn't really a stalker, and wait until the truth comes out. Like,
well, he's going to do another book, and apparently all my horrible tweets are going to be in it. So you better give me credit, and I'll ask for some commission.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, there was a very good article in the Spectator about the Dani Laidley Cinderella movement. I might link to that in the comments as well, because it was quite a good summary. But the guy pointed out that despite the way the media reported on it, people on social media in the comments section were not having a bar of it. Everyone was having a laugh and taking a piss.
People aren't stupid.
Look, another example of people behaving badly. You may remember earlier this year, Lena Van Deventer.
Yes.
She's a board member of the Victorian Women's Trust, a so-called feminist organisation. In response to news that came out of the UK that a rape survivor would be suing a rape crisis service because she rocked up to a support group and there was a man there and she had a panic attack. And so she's suing them. So Lena from Vic Women's Trust tweeted in response to that that woman should be spat on at every opportunity, and that she also hoped that this woman would fall down a well. So I put together a petition calling for her to be kicked off the board. Mary Crooks, the executive director of Vic Women's Trust, said, no, we're not doing that. And anyway, I got the story out to Cindy Lever, and she wrote an article for the Daily Mail. So I'm glad that's on the record, and I'm glad that Lena and Mary Crooks have both been exposed for the dick panderers that they are. Yeah. Crazy days.
Who's going to be the celebrity or the leader of some board or whatever that's going to speak up on this issue? Because my bullshit meter is overflowing. Like, someone's got to be able to see through this stuff and say something. Everyone with a blue tick next to their name on Twitter, or everyone who's in the public eye that has, like JK, has they can't ruin their career. There's people out there whose career will not be ruined by this. Why aren't they speaking out?
Yeah. A little tidbit, you may also remember earlier this year, the Coalition for Biological Reality held a public forum, Gender Identity in Law, at the Hobart City Town Hall. Excuse me. And the council flew the trans flags out the front of the building on the day. We had hired the building and they fucking did that. So it has come out through Tasmanian's version of Freedom of Information requests that it was, in fact, the Lord Mayor, Anna Reynolds, who suggested that the flags be flown. And we're working to properly expose that. There is a code of conduct complaint against the Lord Mayor over this. And once that's all over, I will be asking for our money back for hiring the hall. So, and this has all come at a time when there are local council elections going on in Tasmania. So I hope that it harms her re-election chances.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be speaking more about local councils next week, won't we?
I hope
about
so.
The infection.
I certainly hope so. We had the guest that we were meant to have on today actually pulled out yesterday out of fear that it would harm her relationship with her daughter. Look, we are already at the point where it is dangerous for women to speak out about this stuff, which means you have to start speaking out about this stuff.
Yeah.
It's not going to get any better. It is not going to go away unless women and men start saying no to the extreme excesses of this insane ideology. My God.
And anyone who's going to attack you for it isn't worth having in your life. Even that goes for your job. That goes for if you're living in a place that you are so uncomfortable that you can't be your true self, then you've got to do something about that. And I'm not meaning chuck your job in by speaking your mind, but have a look at, making a position for yourself where you're not going to get penalised for it, where you're not going to lose your job. If people don't start speaking up now, we're going to end off with women like us being incarcerated.
Yeah. I've got to say, I've been watching this Scientology series on Stan. It's on Stan. It's hosted by Leah Remini, who is an actor who starred in that shitty sitcom King of Queens. But she was a Scientology member for something, over 20 years or something crazy like that. And then she woke up from it. And now she's on this mission to expose what they do, every episode she comes back to, they are destroying families. They are literally tearing families apart. And I'm just seeing so many similarities between Scientology and the freaking trans cult bizarre. I'm going to maybe write about it. But what they do is, if you leave the Church of Scientology and you still have family members that are Scientologists, those family members will be ordered by the church to disconnect from you.
Mm-hmm.
So that is sever all ties with your family member that's left the church. This is the same shit that we see happening in the transgender movement. The person who was going to come on today was actually concerned that her daughter would disown her for speaking out. So I understand when it's your children, your relationship with your children that's at stake. Then, you know, that goes for parents of ROGD kids as well. But, you know, if it's your job that's at stake, have a think about what you can do, how you can push back, whether you can offer different policies to your workplace.
And people are beginning to speak up. I was listening to someone on some podcast yesterday about they had compulsory pronouns, and she was the only one out of like 30 people that said, no, I won't do my pronouns. And she said that she'd thought that she was going to comply. And when they came around to her, she just spewed it out and said, no, I'm not going to do this. And she got really emotional. And then afterwards, her boss came up to her and said, oh, look, tell me what's going on for you. Because her boss hadn't realised.
Yeah.
You know, and the boss, she found out that her boss actually understood and agreed with her. Now, if there was an activist in the workplace, it could have gone very differently. Yeah. However, if nobody speaks up, that's how this has become so infiltrated in every level of our society. And it's also how people don't realise, because it's come in through the back door. It's snuck in. And people don't realise that they're infected with this until something happens to them. You know, it's the same with this whole trans ideology. It's a, you know, people think it's some fringe issue, some identity politics, none of my business. I'm not trans, don't know anyone who's trans. I met a trans person once. It's not a big deal. But when it's them who has a man in their change room, or their kid comes home suddenly, their totally gender conforming kid comes home suddenly and says, I was born in the wrong body. That's when they begin to care. And that is increasingly happening. People from all areas of life are coming forward and saying, oh, it's impacting me. What do I do now? You know, what do I do? It's too late. It's infected your workplace. It's infected the whole of the education department. You know, you've got to speak up in any way that you possibly can.
The impact is so far-reaching. It's like so many aspects of society and public life, and our institutions are impacted by this, and you're gonna be confronted with it eventually. So do what you can. Really encourage everyone to speak out. Now, I think we've hit 1 hour, so we should probably wind it up there. Any more tidbits from your end?
Yeah, if you're on YouTube, give us a follow, because we want to try and get up to 2,000 followers. So that'd be really good. So yeah, we need a few more. So send us out and ask your friends to follow us too if they're a bit turfy.
That's it.
So that'd be great.
Like, share, subscribe. Thank you for watching, everyone.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
We really appreciate all of you.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed our special edition with Deborah.
Oh yeah, that got a lot of good feedback.
Yeah, so that's the weightlifter who competed against Laurel Hubbard at the 2018 Commonwealth Games. Check it out if you haven't already. All right, we'll see you next week. Bye.